Hello, everybody. Welcome. This is going to be an adventure. We have a lot of people joining us today. Currently, I have 79 registered attendees. So this is amazing. This is a great turnout. Thank you all for your support. I am Catherine Ortiz. I am the current president of Funeral Consumers Alliance of Humboldt. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is today's topic is about green burial in Humboldt County, options and aspirations. Okay, Michael's going to give us his little talk that he was planning on doing in the spring. So today, we're not going to have audio available for attendees. You can submit your questions either via the chat box or via our website or our email. Please feel free to go ahead and do that at any time during the meeting, and I will be monitoring that and keeping track of them, okay? All of our funds that we currently had reserved from last year's annual event went towards putting out that newsletter to get mailed to you. And if you did not get a copy of that, please feel free to contact us on our website and we will get you one. But we need more money now to do that again next year. So if you feel so graciously able to donate, you can do that on our website, and that'll make it available for us to be able to next year do this again and or hold our annual meeting, my hope is, in person, and still put out our wonderful newsletter every year for you guys, okay? All right, so that's it about that. Here's how you can donate, and we are on social media, so you can do all that there, all right? So our feature presentation is Green Burial in Humboldt County, options and aspirations, and Michael Furniss is gonna present to you all. So I'm gonna go ahead and stop sharing my screen. I never shared it with you guys to show you, oh well, but Michael's gonna share now. So Michael, you've got the floor, go ahead.
Yeah, so thanks everyone for tuning in. Thank you especially to Tracy French and Gretchen Ziegler for encouraging me to do this. I haven't really done this before. I've explained a particular vision to small groups and some investors, but not a large public group. So here we go. And my expertise isn't comprehensive, and you'll find that out as we go. And of course, I'm sitting here all alone looking at a screen. But I know there's quite a few of you out there with an interest in this topic, and thank goodness during this time that we have this ability to do video and to see and communicate with each other. It's really great. And here's my opening slide with acknowledgements of people that have encouraged me, have given me lots of information and knowledge, and slides and other things. So a big shout out to them. And then I'd also like to acknowledge people that are actually doing this work. And I'm sure there's some others that I don't know about, but these are people that have, I know are actively working on trying to provide green burial in various forms to us here in California. And I also mentioned a few UC Berkeley professors, and I'll tell you why, and to give you some idea why. So just a little bit about me. I started studying computer science at UC San Diego for a few years, almost had a degree, but then I got bored. I think I was having too much fun there to be much good at it. And then I decided to become a forester and transferred to UC Berkeley. But once there, I discovered soil science and plant nutrition, and there was a major for that, there still is. And I was in the same school in the adjacent building as forestry, so I basically got both. But the complexity and roles of soils really grabbed me. And toward the end of my first semester, I was sitting next to Strawberry Creek on campus, and it was raining hard. And the soil in the meadow was just taking it all in. And something happened in me watching that infiltration. And strange as this may sound, I've been in love with soils ever since. And so thinking a lot about soils and plant nutrition in those early years, I developed an idea and an aspiration. And that is, I would like to be buried with a redwood tree planted on top of me. Simple idea, right? So I began looking for where that could happen, and kept looking. And what did I find? Nada. I never did find a place where that was allowed. With a few sort of special exemptions, there still isn't anywhere in California where you can do that. There's green burial cemeteries for sure now, they're appearing, but not one where you can go plant your own tree. One exception to that is kind of the off-trail section of the new Purissima Cemetery in Half Moon Bay area. And so I'll talk about green burial, and then I'll also include a special case of a burial method that is green and includes trees, which we're calling entreement. So that's my inspiration to create a place where graves are groves, basically. And so here's some watchwords just to watch for as we go through this: natural, perpetuity, and doable. And then I'm going to add a slogan, and it's this one. And it's in quotes because somebody said it, and it's me that said it. And you'll see that come up from time to time as well. And so this is not a new idea at all. What's new actually is the modern burial conventions and practices we're familiar with. So natural burial, actually the people that are really into this would prefer to call it natural burial rather than green. But green is kind of won the day in terms of the terminology. That's how people think of it. That's how the term that's mostly used. But you'll also see the term natural burial used. And it's a good term because that's really what it is. And it's not an innovation. It was the real traditional practice and how people have been buried for, since time immemorial. But it became rare outside of some religious cemeteries in the US. And now it's coming back as an innovation and actually as an invitation to all sorts of ways to enhance our culture. I'll note that the modern green burial movement really began in the UK and is far more advanced there than it is in the US. So in essence, natural green burial is simple. It eliminates the need for embalming fluids. There are no concrete vaults, and biodegradable materials are used for the casket, or there's just a burial shroud, just a piece of cloth. And that's it. That's the essence of green burial right there. And there's quite a bit more that is to it or can be to it, but in essence, this is what green burial is: no embalming, no vaults, and a biodegradable casket. And so natural decomposition is encouraged. And so these are the aspirations of a green cemetery. We're basically not trying to inhibit decomposition. Here's that trussed soil. And the way many cemeteries are done now, you're completely isolated from the soil. Environmentally sustainable practices, a philosophy of land stewardship, and sometimes, and more often, it'll support land trusts or conservation lands, recreational preserves, or the use of cemeteries as parks, or even the idea of family groves. And basically, there's three types of green burial cemeteries. This classification has been put out by the Green Burial Council, which is an important organization that's been doing this work and been setting standards for green burial, and very important work that they're doing. And basically, there's hybrid burial grounds, and they are within a conventional cemetery. But there's no vaults and biodegradable containers. And the Green Burial Council doesn't require that hybrid burial grounds for their certification not use embalming, but I think most of them do not allow or permit embalming. And then natural burial grounds in their classification. So this is no toxic chemicals, no non-organic caskets, no vaults, and no non-native markers. And the conservation burial ground, so going even a little further into what is a very exciting type of cemetery for me, and that is land preservation with the burial fees, creating revenue stream to further conservation and restoration. And I'll talk a little more about that as we go along. These are typically in wild natural settings or kind of wilderness settings. And even if you don't charge much for burial, it makes quite a bit of money. And that money can be readily used to buy more land or to restore and ensure conservation of the land that the cemetery is on. So there's the three different types as from the Green Burial Council. And here's just a depiction of kind of the difference here. On the left, you're in a box, basically in a casket inside of a concrete vault. And to the right, you're in the biological zone, you're biodegradable, you're sort of in the biology of the land, and your decomposition is encouraged. And soil is really good at decomposing anything you give to it. It's like a big inside-out digestive system, and it works really well. The one on the left is a little inaccurate. Usually the concrete vault extends to up near the surface, and there's some pea gravel on top and then a little bit of soil to support the grass. But this is the idea, is that you have a deep box in a box, or you have relatively shallow and highly biodegradable. And then there's that watchword again, trust soil. And then this is just a little bit of what it looks like. These are both shroud burials. And relatively shallow. And then here's a look at, see the wicker casket. These are popular. Lots of those available now. And down in the lower left is a kind of a paper mache. And then above that is a container for ashes. We don't encourage placing ashes in a single place like that. They really should be spread. Ashes are plant nutrients, but they're better for plants if they're spread around. And then here's a pine box, highly biodegradable. And then below that is a cardboard casket, which is even more biodegradable in some of the options that are used. And then this is just a good idea of it's a bookshelf while you're alive. And it's converted to your casket when your time comes. And there's some more pictures of shroud burials. If you notice on the right, there's a tree above the person, and that's what I'm talking about. And I don't know where this is, but apparently they plan to plant a tree on the grave when it's done, and that's sort of very much what inspires me is to be intrigued or to have the nutrients in my body rise into the trees. So why stop there? The basics of no embalming, no vaults, biodegradable materials. But there's lots of options to enhance a green burial cemetery, and many people that establish these want to do that. So you may have natural grave markers. And the idea is to make it beautiful and make it spiritually and aesthetically attractive for people, which our typical cemeteries often don't do very well. So natural grave markers, some of the wilderness cemeteries have GPS only. So you have GPS coordinates and maybe a map in the office that shows you where the graves are. But there's no markers at all. Native vegetation restoration, some multi-use special ecological spaces or cemeteries that are co-used as parks, attracting people to come and enjoy them. Burial in the root zone, and I'll talk more about that. Entreatment, that is my passion, and a number of other kinds of enhancements that can go along with the basics of green burial. And so here's just a marker that is in one of the East Coast green cemeteries. So it's environmentally friendly burial options with low carbon footprint and open space. And this is something that people want. And just another picture showing what some of this might look like with simple natural grave markers. In the lower left, there's a shroud and a pretty picture of some flowers that are growing by a cypress tree on the HSU campus. So one of the things I'd like to address, and people always ask about this and often just don't know, and are unembalmed bodies toxic or dangerous? And basically, they're not. They require only the caution in handling as do living persons. So yes, if somebody has an infectious disease, you have to be cognizant of that. Although any kind of infection goes away really quickly once the body dies. The infections depend on a live body. So bodies are not dangerous, even though a lot of people think they're creepy, but they're not. They're just bodies. And there's been a number of studies. Bodies do not contaminate groundwater where the soils and site hydrology are suitable. And it's easy to find suitable soils. And then people ask, what about all the pesticides we eat, or even the chemotherapy drugs that sometimes people take toward the end of life? And I would basically say this: trust soil. Soil is very good at filtering things out. And in fact, in an unembalmed body, there isn't even much to filter. And if you have so much pesticide or chemotherapy in your body that it's going to be a problem for the environment, you're going to be dead from that anyway. So that's really not an issue. And we can't say bodies are organic. Probably none of us could claim to be fully organic. We're all biodegradable, but we're not organic. There's really no problem with stuff getting away. And even in cemeteries that have a lot of embalmed bodies, many, many tons of formaldehyde, they haven't been able to document a problem with groundwater. So this is why septic tanks work, is because we can trust soil. And good environmental engineers understand this, and it works well in cemeteries as well. So here's just a little picture of bodies decompose and turn into a beautiful garden. And so there's growing demand for this. Many people want this, and the fact that we have a lot of participants on the call here is pretty good evidence of that. It was about 22 years ago, the first US green cemetery appeared. They appeared in the UK long before that, but the US is really catching on. As of June of 2019, there were 240 green cemeteries in the USA. And there's been a number of surveys, and the interest is rising. So quite a few people are interested in this. And once people know about it, they become even more interested in it. And if you follow the articles that are put out about this, as I do, there's a lot of them. The journalists love to talk about this, and there are, in the past 2 years, literally hundreds of articles have been written about green and natural burial. So it's happening. There is a movement. It's moving quickly, and this is something that people want, and the baby boomers want it. This sounds funny, but the baby boomers are getting old and becoming the death boomers. And the boomers get what they want. And this is something that we want. And so we're going to get it. And if you do some searching on the internet, you get a sense of how popular it is. So on the left, there's searching Vimeo. And this is just a few of the videos that are about green burial, natural burial, and all the other items about death care, which go well beyond burial, of course. On YouTube, there's lots and lots of stuff about this, and you can search YouTube for green burial or natural burial, and you'll find a plethora of stuff. If you just do a regular Google search, you can see on the left here, there's almost 2 million results. And that includes the full term green burial, not just results for green or burial. This is green burial, almost 2 million results. And then the hashtag green burial, about 78 1,600 results. So this is a happening thing. It's really coming around in the US of A. And so our supply of green cemeteries is actually pretty badly lagging the demand. People want this, and it is not as available as it needs to be. And so I wanted to take a look at why that is. And these are just my ideas as to why that's happened. First of all, it's complex to set this up, but what isn't? I've been working on small run-of-the-river hydropower for RCEA lately, and it's much more complex than setting up a green burial cemetery. So yes, it's complex to do, but it's perfectly doable. It requires dedicated real estate, and so you have to have a chunk of land. Not all that much, really. You could get a great, you could have a great green burial cemetery with 10 or 20 acres is all. But it ties up that real estate forever. It's a real encumbrance, and a lot of people might not want to do that, or that is kind of a hit on the financial value of that real estate. There are regulatory issues and constraints. None of these are insurmountable, not at all. The state and the counties, the feds, the cemetery law is state law, and counties are always involved one way or another. They realize that this is a public good and a public service, and they don't stand in the way, but there are regulations, and you just kind of have to slog your way through them. And there's a lot of misinformation out there. And when I talk to people about this, I can't tell you how many people have said, oh, that's not allowed, is it? Or is that allowed? And it's like, yes, of course it's allowed. It's absolutely allowed. And so the idea that you can't do this for some reason, or somehow it's been tied up so these can't be established, is simply not true. And I don't know why people believe that, but they do. So investors are not real big on cemeteries. It doesn't have annuity value where you keep getting paid. There's no razor blades to sell with the razor. And again, the land is encumbered in perpetuity. And then there are psychological issues. And I'm not a psychologist, but these I think are fairly, these are fairly pervasive. People don't like to talk and think about this until you sort of get over the hump, like probably you all have, and become interested in it. And it's like, yeah, I'm ready to talk about this. And there isn't anybody that isn't going to die and doesn't have some thought about what that means and what they're going to do. Just as an example, there's a professional I know who I have great respect for, but when I was talking about this, she said, well, why would you put a place of sorrow in an otherwise really beautiful place that people appreciate? And there it is. Cemeteries should not be a place of sorrow. They should be a place of memorial, and a place for the living, and a place for the living to come and celebrate their ancestors. And so that's what we would like to do, is get beyond the idea that a cemetery is a sad or scary place, and make it into a place that feeds people's souls, spirits, a place of inspiration, a place of where people to get together and enjoy the natural world. So, but anyway, I'm interested in anybody's ideas about why more of these haven't appeared in our area, and actually why more haven't appeared in California in general. Or the United States in general. The supply really does lag the demand. And if we can look at the barriers and get real about why that's happening, then we have some chance of overcoming those barriers. And so I know people are interested in what, excuse me, the local options are. And I'm not a best one to know all about this. So the folks at hospice and the good folks at the funeral homes know the details, and we'll know if new opportunities arise. And maybe some new ones have arisen just recently. And if you know of them, put them in the chat window. But for now, we have one local option, as far as I know, and that's the Blue Lake Cemetery. And it's a hybrid cemetery. It has conventional burial, but there's a green burial area that was established some time ago. And it's really lovely. It's a really a beautiful place. There's actually some old growth redwood that you see up on the right side there. Those are primary redwoods that survived the European logging period. Unfortunately, you can't pre-buy a spot or a family plot there, and that's a sticking point for a lot of people. And if you die and want to be buried there, they just kind of slot you in next to the last person, and that's a little bit unfortunate. It's getting full. It doesn't have a whole lot of space left. It has lots of concrete, like many conventional cemeteries. There's just concrete everywhere. And it doesn't appear to be all that well maintained. I went out there the other day, and it hasn't been mowed, and there's poison oak growing up the trees, and somebody went and put an American flag on every grave, which normally I don't think you would allow that if there was some more governance around. You know, some people might like a flag, but I don't think they asked anybody if they wanted a flag. Anyway, so there's that. I'll mention also, I meant to put a picture of that in here, but I didn't. But the Purissima Cemetery outside of Half Moon Bay, it was established by Ed Bixby and his wife. Ed's been very active in the Green Burial movement and in the Green Burial Council. And he's very knowledgeable and a wonderful guy. And the Purissima Cemetery is a historic cemetery that they kind of pulled out of the brush. They bought it, and nobody had maintained it for many, many years. And so they kind of cleared it away and honored the existing graves that are in there, and then set up a green burial cemetery out there. The prices are low, and it's a good ways from here. Half Moon Bay's, 6-7 hours from here, but it's a good one. And there's a number of others. And if you want to find out where all they are at present, you see on the left here, the Natural Burial Cemetery Guide. This is the West version of it. You can buy the whole thing, or you can just buy the West version of it. And I think it's quite cheap. I think it was $11 or something like that in the digital version. And then a really excellent publication that just came out from Elizabeth Fournier, the Green Burial Guidebook. And there's a number of other things that are out there, but both of these publications have an inventory of where the green cemeteries are. Neither of them catch the Blue Lake Cemetery, unfortunately. It's like, oh yeah, Humboldt, does it exist? Yeah, well, I would recommend these publications to you if you're really serious about these. They're very affordable, and they're published, and you can get them. And then if you go to the bookstores or to Amazon or Barnes & Noble and you search for these, you'll also find a lot of other books about green and natural burial and all the other aspects of death care that you might also be interested in. And so I've got a couple places cooking with my prime collaborator, the wonderful David Katz. This is the Santa Rosa David Katz. And we've been cooking stuff up for a good while. And things are moving in the right direction and actually getting fairly close to where we're going to start to implement. I'm not going to say any more about that, but things are rolling, and I'm pretty excited. It's a good time to be talking about it because we're getting close to actually doing it. I did meet with individually with each member of the Arcata City Council and mentioned that that a municipal cemetery is a good public service and could readily be done. Arcata owns a lot of land. And they did create a goal. One of their goals for the next 2 years is to study the feasibility of a municipal cemetery on its land. So maybe this might even happen on Arcata. The thing I really want to emphasize is this is doable. Okay, it's not impossible. It's not even that hard. And there, actually, I say there are some other projects, I think, going on. Jenny Hutchinson and Georgiana Wood. And I know there's been some other groups that have gotten together and it's like, let's see if we can do this. And I just encourage everyone to look at this as a doable thing. It's absolutely doable. There's nothing preventing you from doing it. It's complex, but it's not that hard. And so if you're interested in establishing a green burial cemetery in various forms, I would say go for it. We really need it. You know, who's going to be first to come in with a good one? So who sponsors these? What kind of entities set these up and run them? There's at least 3 kinds of entities, and there's examples of all of these, quite a few examples of all of these. First of all, a nonprofit or a corporation. So for example, the Greenwood Cemetery in Arcata is run by, I think it's a nonprofit. And then a municipality can run it, like a county or a city or a special districts that's made up of several different cities and county. Then also religious entities have always had cemeteries or graveyards. And all 3 of these are out there. And the first one is subject to regulation by the State Department of Consumer Affairs and their funeral and cemeteries division. And there are lots of rules, but they're all reasonable. And then if a municipality or a religious entity does it, then it's up to them how they do it, and they regulate themselves. However, the county is typically involved in reviewing that, and often there's a need for a use permit from the counties. And then this is my opinion, but I just bet you anybody on the call would agree with this, that all should have legal provisions for perpetuity. That once it's a cemetery, there's some sort of a legal framework where it's always going to be a cemetery. And if I was in a live meeting, I would ask for a show of hands here. Does everybody think cemeteries should have perpetuity? And why would I even say this? Well, many of them don't. And they actually, surprisingly, basically have the ability to dig you up and move you if you're buried there. It doesn't happen very often. It's legally quite complex to do, but they do have the ability to do that. And I don't think that's a good idea. I think anything that's set up going forward should have a legal guarantee of perpetuity. And then what about the density of graves? Well, this is a major decision that you have to make in design. And the modern practice, say the cemeteries that you see, that you're familiar with, is typically 800 to 1,200 graves per acre. So it's really a lot. And basically, the graves are kind of just kind of laid out in rows next to each other. Many green or natural burial areas have a considerably lower density of 100 to 300 graves per acre. And then I say our vision, this is on a place that has a lot of acres. It's something like 10 to 30 per acre. So a very low density relative to the conventional approach. But this is something that is a very big determinant in the design of green burial. And if you have enough land, going low density is a nice way to go. And I would recommend that. And so this is just a picture of some kind of memorial natural areas with natural monuments. And there was a question about monumentation. It's actually deciding what kind of monuments are allowed in the cemetery is a very important design decision. As I mentioned, some really wild cemeteries have no markers at all. You can't even tell there's anybody buried there, and that's the whole idea. But other people do like monuments of one sort. And one of the things that seems to be common is that they're natural or local materials, and they don't protrude above the ground. They're not like a headstone or a great big sign that says this is this person or this family or something like that. So the monumentation is a big decision point, and there's no really rules on that. Most talks and discussions about green burial start off with what's wrong with conventional burial. And I wanted to start off with, talking about what's right with green burial and not just jump right into the problems with conventional burial. But I am going to cover that because why do we call it green? And that's basically because conventional burial isn't very green, and it certainly isn't natural. And so what you have is a toxified body inside a wood and metal box inside a concrete vault. Not all modern cemeteries are like this. For example, Jews and Muslims are generally observant. Jews and Muslims have typically had natural burial cemeteries all along. But most cemeteries actually look like this when you peel away the grass. They're full of these concrete vaults. The body is typically filled up with formaldehyde and a few other really nasty things to keep the natural decomposition processes at bay, and then put in a casket. And so you're in a box on a lawn, and typically you've been preserved with formaldehyde. And there may be a sense that this will keep your body intact. It doesn't. You don't decompose as fast as you would in soil by any means, but eventually you just kind of liquefy and seep out the cracks in the bottom of the casket. And typically these vaults actually are open on the bottom. Not all of them are, but there is soil on the bottom of these. So at least there's a little bit of soil involved. But this is what people, I think, are kind of rejecting. We don't want to do it that way anymore. And most don't know that these vaults underlay most cemeteries. And most conventional cemeteries essentially tend to prioritize lawn maintenance and making things feel very sanitary, but actually are making them toxic and wasteful and with a considerable environmental footprint. And so you have these elements. You have typically grass, which requires water and fertilizers and pesticides. You have a vault, steel reinforced concrete, and quite a lot of it. You have a coffin that may be made with tropical hardwoods and a lot of metals. And the body is essentially toxified with formaldehyde and other goodies. And essentially, you don't have a burial in the natural earth. You have what you might consider a buried mausoleum. A mausoleum is some sort of a structure that accommodates an entire body. And the really big monuments you see in conventional cemeteries are typically mausoleums. Or columbariums where ashes are only stored. But basically, conventional burial is just a buried mausoleum. You're not being buried in the earth. You're being buried in concrete in a box. And so most of our cemeteries, as you well know, are lawns. And this has become kind of the custom. Lawns need pesticides, herbicides, they endanger workers. There's fertilizers that can enter the water table. They can endanger health. They require concrete vaults for ease of lawn maintenance. So in a green cemetery, as bodies or the biodegradable casket degrades, the ground will settle and needs to be kind of filled in. And conventional cemetery, they don't want that. They'd rather not have to deal with that. And so that's one of the reasons for the vault. It's prioritizing lawn maintenance. Also makes it easier to dig you up if they need to do that, but that's another topic. And it allows embalming fluids, and the embalming fluids are particularly dangerous to the embalmers. So, it's often with toxic chemicals, it's the workers that get the worst of it. Embalmers have a dangerous job for that reason. And then many of them are reaching capacity even in the rural areas. In the old world, or say in Europe, their cemeteries have reached capacity a long time ago, and they just keep putting more people on top of each other. And in most of their cemeteries, you can only lease the burial site. You say, well, you pay this much and you can have it for 10 years, and then we're going to put somebody on top of you. That's not happening so much here yet, but it will as the time goes on. So, and then the thing that I really don't like, maybe you're okay with it, but is the tremendous amount of concrete that shows up in our cemeteries. And maybe people like this sort of artificial rock as something that lasts a long time, but it does turn kind of over time, turns into junk as the ground settles and the concrete breaks up and whatnot. But there's a lot of cemeteries that are mostly concrete. And you may know this one, it's in Arcata. And it's very common. The Blue Lake Cemetery has a lot of this too. And just concrete. And it's terrible for climate change. I'm a climate scientist. And CO2 releases a lot of carbon dioxide when it's manufactured. And it takes a lot of energy to manufacture it. And the manufacturer also releases mercury into the atmosphere, which is something that we really worry about, something that shows up in the tuna fish. And so concrete is not green at all. And of all the conventional burial techniques, this is the one that bothers me the most. And I hope we can kind of get away from this. And if you want something really has a sense of permanence, how about the natural flora. How about a tree? This is in the US, and this is per year. So 1.6 million tons of concrete, 104,000 tons of steel, almost 1 million gallons of formaldehyde. You could fill 2 Olympic swimming pools. 2,700 tons of copper and bronze, burial of tropical hardwoods like mahogany, some of which are in real trouble. Tens of thousands of tons of CO2 emissions. And it also tends to be quite costly. It is not cheap to bury in this way. And then cremation. Many people choose cremation, and I think more and more are choosing it, basically because they are not drawn to the conventional burial practices. But this is not super green. It takes as much fossil fuel as a 4,800 mile auto trip. It releases pollutants like mercury and greenhouse gases and smoke and particulates. There's sulfur dioxide and nitrogen oxide. Both contribute to acid rain. Nitrous oxides are a serious air pollutant, really kind of the worst air pollutant. And it's a potent long-lived greenhouse gas as well. And the cremation emits dioxin, which is one of the most potent toxins known. So cremation is also not green. I did want to say this, though. There's no need for the green burial movement to shame those who want a modern conventional burial or a fancy casket, or they want to be embalmed, or want to have lots of concrete. I think we should that's fine. The conventional practice is problematic, and we can't really call it green, but it's not a priority environmental problem. We're not solving a huge environmental problem by going green. And I don't think that's why most people are motivated for a natural burial, actually. It is a plus that at the end of your life, you're not contributing to the degradation of the environment. But I do think if people want the old kind of burial or the standard conventional burial, that's okay. And we shouldn't shame people into thinking they're not being green at the end of their lives. It's the end of a life. Do what you want, get what you want, have it your way. There's enough constraints on the whole thing. Anyway, and there's a picture of George Floyd's casket, and yeah, it's pretty fancy, and that's going to be buried. But that's what they wanted, and that's what they should have. So I would say that the non-green aspect of the conventional cemeteries, even though I've kind of run down chapter and verse of why that's bad, it's not a huge high priority environmental problem, and we shouldn't shame people at the end of their life for not being green. That's just my opinion, but I think it's important to look at it that way. And then this is what the Green Burial Council calls solutions to invented problems. That you might have seen these things, and I would say I really appreciate that they increase the awareness of burial and adding a biological component to the burial, and pay homage to them for that. But each one of these gets the soil science all wrong. This is a container where you put in ashes, and it comes with a tree seed. It goes on top. This is dumb, because if you want to establish a tree, you really should use a seedling, and you wouldn't concentrate the ashes below the tree seed. It isn't going to work. Ashes should be spread. They have plant nutrients, but they're salty and they're kind of hot, and you definitely don't want them all in one place. And so this is bogus. The one in the middle, this was very widely shared and kind of lovely. The symbolism is great, but this is an artist's conception. These don't actually exist. And the idea is that you would kind of be in a fetal position in this egg here, and then you plant a tree on top. So I love the idea of planting a tree on top, which it isn't actually new, but you can't get these. This was so popular, actually, they are making a paper mache version of these little eggs to put ashes in, but not to put a whole body in. And in fact, if you put a body in the ground and want to plant a tree, it's better if the body is actually shallow and not reaching way down like this, because feeder roots from plants like to be near the surface, as near the surface as possible. And in fact, if we use redwood, which is, as I said in the beginning, was my motivation, it has a very shallow root system, and only the water-seeking roots go deep like this. And then the infinity mushroom burial suit. This is a very popular TED Talk. And again, homage to this for increasing awareness of natural decomposition. But save your money. We know from soil science that if you introduce a non-native or non-local biota into the soil, it is immediately eaten by the locals. These fungus wouldn't last a couple of days, and they'd just become food for the local biota. And we know that from soil science. And there are a few exceptions. If you put a rhizobium around a legume seed or something like that, you have some hope of it taking and not getting eaten. But the fungus suit just wouldn't really do anything. Also, the prime decomposer for the first good while is bacteria, not fungi. The fungi come in later and do an important function in terms of turning things into long-lived humus and whatnot, but it's really the bacteria that do the job. And so this is, $10 worth of material and has some fungal spores in it and sells for $1,500. Save your money. These are kind of gimmicks and are kind of capitalizing on the idea of green burial and its popularity. What we really need is cemeteries, not goodies like this. And that's harder. It's easier to sell these kinds of things than it is to establish cemeteries. But what we really need is the cemeteries and places where these burials can happen. Or, with the middle thing, good luck trying to find a place that will let you plant a tree on top of a grave. Really hard to find. And basically, I have not been able to find it in all these years of looking. And again, trust soil. However, there is a wonderful new innovation called human composting. And this has been cleared in Washington State, and they have worked out the technology to do it. And it's called Recompose is the process. A great group of young people have figured out how to do this. And they were really savvy and got the state legislature to say that this was okay. When I first heard about it, I said, the state will never allow that. But they did. And so now California has to catch up and allow this to happen. I think it takes a few weeks to compost your body. It yields about 1 cubic yard of compost. So it yields a lot of stuff. And then you can put that wherever you want. It doesn't have the restrictions that you would have with a regular corpse. Basically has the same kind of status as ashes, and you can kind of put those anywhere you want. And then I would say, a green cemetery that has an emphasis on plants and trees and natural environment and a sense of perpetuity and some guaranteed perpetuity would be a good place to put this compost. So this is a great thing, and hats off to the people at Recompose for bringing this to fruition. And so I would say trust soil and feed it compost. So that brings me to the last kind of cemetery, and that is conservation burial. And this is a really exciting one, and this is the one that I tend to want to do. And this is green burial with an emphasis on land restoration and funding for additional conservation and engendering permanent land conservation and restoration. And as I mentioned, if you establish a cemetery and sell places for people to go, you make a lot of money. You're not making Silicon Valley style money, but it pencils out remarkably well. And what is that money for? Well, go conserve some additional land. And Dr. Billy Campbell has really articulated this just beautifully, and he made it real and set up a place called Ramsey Creek Preserve Memorial Ecosystems in South Carolina. Basically pointed out that Americans spend many billions of dollars on death and burial every year. And if you could take just a small portion of that and use that to increase the amount of conserved lands, protected lands, or sanctified, perpetually conserved and protected lands, that would really be a great thing. And we actually sort of change the culture. And instead of making places that few people want to go, we'd make places that serve the culture, serve the cause of additional land conservation. So this is really a great thing. And it goes further than green burial, again, promoting land conservation, restoring natural habitats, returning nutrients to the land, and connecting people and families to their valued forests, to their meadows and watersheds, in a very intimate and meaningful way. And this is a big opportunity. And I think a lot of people that look at green burial think, you know, why stop there with the no embalming, no vaults, and biodegradable caskets? Let's do more than that. Let's, you know, really conserve land, restore ecology, make a place that people really want to go and hang out and that. So, and it protects land in perpetuity. Burials really have very low impact. Green burials have very low impact. You can fund further land acquisition, as I mentioned, ecological restoration. It demonstrates another form of working landscape. So many people will donate conservation easements to land trusts, but they usually want to have some sort of a working landscape so that they can pay their taxes and fix the roads and whatnot. And usually that's grazing or logging or agriculture. And those are fine, but this is another form of where the landscape can work and generate revenue for upkeep and caretaking without necessarily exploiting it at all. And then connecting people to nature and forests. And so here's a story for you. I was walking home last night and decided to take a shortcut through the cemetery. And 3 girls walked up to me and explained that they were scared to walk past the cemetery at night. And so I agreed to let them walk along with me. And I told them, you know, I understand. I used to get freaked out too when I was alive. I've never seen anyone run away so fast. That didn't actually happen to me. It's a story I found. It's like, I need a cemetery joke here. But anyway, this is not a favorite place to visit ancestors. It's just not a place that people find very attractive. It looks kind of Halloween-y and a little bit scary. Teenagers like to go there to get scared, and it's not a place that attracts families to come and have a picnic or, you know, to revel in remembering the ancestors. But what if cemeteries look more like this? And there's no reason they can't. And so that's what I'm really motivated by, of creating sort of a family groves idea. And there are green cemeteries that do look like this, that are natural, kind of wild places, and are not dominated by headstones and the kind of thing that we normally see in our cemeteries. And then, you know, people have memorial groves like this. There are big signs in that. But usually these are people that gave a lot of money and so had a lot of money to give. And so they got a grove dedicated to their family or a couple or something like that. But what if a family could afford a memorial grove for burial and life rituals, a family of modest means? So instead of having to give $5 million to get a dedicated grove, maybe you give $5,000 and you get a family grove. And that's something of the vision that we're working on now. And there's no reason we can't do that, especially back in the wildlands, where there's just still an awful lot of land available. And it's not only for burial. You could have a family grove that was for life markers and life rituals, births and coming of age, graduation, weddings, retirement, significant events that you go there. It could be a place for ashes, of course, to be placed by people that are choosing cremation. Your pets can go there. And then I wanted to just relate a story, a custom from sub-Saharan Africa called the Mahamba tree. And there's a Bantu custom. A Mahamba is a spirit tree that is planted when a child is born. And then as soon as possible after birth, the child and its parents find a suitable place and plant a Mahamba. And they're making sure that the tree is native and it will be accessible in the future. And as soon as the child is able to walk, you bring him or her out to meet the tree and to feed it. And you encourage the child to take over the care and feeding of the tree and seal these responsibilities with gifts. And you continually reinforcing the merit to be gained from the act in whatever terms that the child understands. And so you have a legend of a tree that brings good fortune. And this is a custom that, you know, we could adopt, and it makes sense to people actually, that when a child is born, a tree is planted, and maybe, you know, 80 years hence that person will be buried under that tree. And so again, that's you know, one of the things that we could do with green cemeteries is actually make them places, not just for burial, but for life cycle rituals and places whenever something meaningful happens, you go to the grove. And then this is the idea. I actually have registered the trademark of entrement. We like the word so much. It's an alternative to interment. And, where it's not a grave, it's really a grove. And that's what we're working toward. One of the ways you accomplish that is by burying in the root zone. So 6 feet down isn't really going to work very well. Soils get pretty biologically inactive at 6 feet down. But fortunately, wonderfully, California law allows an 18-inch minimum burial depth. And burial depths vary state by state. Many states don't have a minimum burial depth, but those that do, it varies from 12 inches to about 4 feet, the legal depth. And there's a number that allow 18 inches. There's one state, but I forgot which one it is, that allows 12 inches. Many states, it's 3+ feet, which is still kind of in the root zone, but it's getting a little bit deep. So the biological activity is greater as you go up in the top, what's called the topsoil. And that's where the rapid decomposition will really happen. So it's really ideal for decomposition to be buried shallow in a green burial cemetery. And everybody says, oh, animals will dig you up. And that doesn't seem to happen. 18 inches is plenty deep to keep the pigs and the raccoons and everybody else out. But if there is a problem, and we're actually testing that again, then there are some measures that can be taken to make sure that animals don't dig you up. Unless you really want the animals to dig you up, but no, we don't want that to happen. But basically, your remains are plant nutrients and soil enrichers, and they will quickly rise into the trees. And so that's the idea of entrement, and another enhancement to a green burial, where the body is planted in an existing forest or even in an orchard, or you do it yourself and plant your own grove on top of the family plot or the family grove, and you make a grove for yourself. Anyway, so we're connecting these trends, conservation easements, forest restoration, low impact land uses. Demographic destiny means there's just an awful lot of people getting old now because of the baby boom situation. Natural burial, human reverence for trees and forests. Humans everywhere love trees and forests. Everywhere I go, there's a great reverence for trees and forests. There's just something about them that humans really connect with and love. And that's everywhere. It's just a human aspiration, a human connection. And then a desire for ritual and meaning. And many people think that we need more of that in our modern world. The idea of sanctifying lands and connecting humans and forests through ritual and sacred ground, and really enhancing our culture by doing something that's really obvious, but we're not really doing it yet. So that's the aspiration from my end. The New York Times not long ago had a beautiful pictorial essay. These days, everyone wants to be a tree. And you can see here's a grave with a simple natural marker in the drawing, and a tree very nearby. But as I've mentioned, this isn't available. And even the green burial cemeteries that you find, they don't really allow you to do this. So if we're successful and we establish a cemetery or 2 or 3, we will allow you to do this. And that's the whole idea. Although if you want a grassland burial, we will accommodate that as well, and try to restore the site with deep-rooted grass species that will go down there and benefit from your decomposition. And then by way of review, I'd like to go through, the why you would do this. And people need and want this. There's no question about it. And the more people that find out about it, the more people want it. And it's ultra low impact, very, very low impact on a site. And as far as neighbors go, you can tell your neighbors, hey, the dead people make really good neighbors. And it's a new and effective way to derive revenue for working conservation lands. As I mentioned, conservation easements showing up all over the place. And this is one way to pay for the maintenance and upkeep and caretaking. And then even at low prices, it pays for itself and you get revenue for restoration and for new conservation lands and cemeteries. Culturally, and this is maybe more important than anything, we're connecting forests and people through meaningful life rituals, retreat, education, and making places that connect people with the natural world and increase their feeling that they are part of this natural world, even to the point of being decomposed in it and contributing to its nutrients. And so I'll just show a few pictures of places that have occurred or that are existing. Again, Ramsey Creek, a great one, and has that conservation burial concept in it in South Carolina. This is the Foxfield Preserve in Ohio. Here's one in Florida. Most of them are on the east. The west is lagging behind in establishing these. And maybe that's because the east is closer to the UK or something, I'm not sure. The one on the left has a tree, isn't that cool? And then Prairie Creek Conservation Cemetery is a very well-known and very popular, and the proprietor or the founder of that is very articulate. I think he's been to Humboldt County, and has a niece here, and has been very effective in promulgating this idea of green burial and why we ought to do it. This is one that's in the West. It's in kind of north central Washington state, and it's a wilderness burial area called the White Eagle Memorial Preserve. And it's really, really nice and very protected. This is one of the ones where you're probably not even going to be able to tell anybody is buried in a particular place. But if you're interested in that, this is a great example of a Western green burial cemetery that is based on wilderness values and conserving a place in its most natural state, and then restoring areas that need that. Here's again another one that is in Florida, showing a conceptual plan, and the design process for green cemeteries is really a juicy one and challenging, but I think it's could be a lot of fun for a good group, and that was advised by a good landscape architect. And so here's a little grove that could be a family grove of existing redwoods. And I have an old friend, Lori Lewis. Probably many of you know her. She's quite a well-known bluegrass musician, a great singer-songwriter. And she comes up here and plays for us quite often. And she found out I was interested in this, and she shared with me, she says, here's my take on it, and shared with me one of her many, many songs. And just one of the lines in there is, don't pickle me or char my skin, just dig a hole and roll me in. I ain't gonna go, I'm gonna stay and help this garden grow. And so if you want to hear that, just search for Lori Lewis and Garden Grow, and you'll hear it. It's really wonderful. And as far as a call to action, do you happen to have land that could become a cemetery? And so that's a big step. And it's why a lot of groups that have been interested in this never really got off the ground, is that they didn't really have a piece of land that they could dedicate to this. If you happen to have some and you think it's a good idea, maybe consider contacting one of the FCA or one of the people that I've listed on here as to how you might go about getting that to be a green cemetery. And then we need volunteers. For example, my project needs a volunteer coordinator, attorney, landscape architect, a civil engineer, some fundraisers. And basically we need culture changers. And I'm hoping that all of you are willing to step up and take that role of advocating for green burial, advocating for changing the culture so that death and burial is not such a negative thing, but is something that is just a circle of life and is positive, and we remember the ancestors in beautiful, inspiring places. These days, everybody wants your email address, and so do I. So having a community of people that are all interested in the same thing is a very powerful thing. And so if you don't want the local Funeral Consumers Alliance to share your email with me, just let them know or put it in the chat window, and we can take that off of there. It's important for people to collaborate through time. This is not a one-off. This is something that's happening and is going to keep happening. So. And then finally, let's go to questions and discussion. And I hope my presentation wasn't too long. I tend to be a little long-winded. Adjunct professor and teach climate change in forestry and engineering, and they always cut me off at an hour and 20 minutes. So let's go to questions.
That's why we made it just one speaker. We have had multiple speakers in the past, but we found that kind of made it hard for the speaker to get everything out they wanted. So as a board, we have voted to just keep it to one person. That way you can really get into what you want. And it's totally fine. It was wonderful, Michael. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
I have several questions. So, and I've also shared your email address your website in the chat for everyone. So anyone who wants that, they can get it. It's right there, but it's also on our website as well. Go ahead and stop sharing your screen, Michael, and then I'll be able to combine all these questions, and we'll just start at the top, okay?
Mm-hmm.
We've got several coming in. We got a few more. So I'm just going to start at the top. The first one was from, one of the first ones I sent to you was from Bonnie Leslie. She asked, where is green burial available in Humboldt County, and what is the cost?
Let's see. Well, the only place I know of is the Blue Lake Cemetery. It's a hybrid cemetery, and it has a green area. And I don't know what the cost is, but I think it's relatively low cost. It's not expensive. There are green burial cemeteries in other counties. For example, there's a fancy one. The name is escaping me, in Marin County. But a friend of mine calls it Gucci Green because it's really expensive. There's only one option now, and that's why part of my talk is saying, hey, this is doable. Please get it together and do it, because we need that, and there are just not enough available now. So we have one option. You can't pre-buy a plot there. But I fully expect other options to come online within the next year or three. So.
Okay, excellent. All right, the next question was, John Goodman has several. His first one is green burial a legal option in every county in California? If not, who sets the policy for each county? And is there an easy place to see which counties allow it and which do not? And then along with that, he asks if you can comment any legal limitations to those places where it is legal. And finally, if it isn't legal now in our county, what is your advice to successful strategies to get the powers that be to permit it?
Well, it's not illegal anywhere, but there are places where you can and can't do it. So there's a bit of a distinction there. And I actually meant to mention that the zoning needs to allow cemeteries. And zoning is a county level deal. And many of the county, for example, in Humboldt County, many of the county zoning classifications do allow cemeteries, and some do not. And so that has to be allowed there. Although, you can always petition a board of supervisors to change the zoning. And for example, timber protection zone doesn't allow cemeteries in Humboldt County or in Sonoma County. And this is too bad, because I believe a low density green cemetery is altogether consistent with the objectives of timber protection zone. So that's something that we need to work on. But as far as a county basically saying, no, you can't do green burial, or you can't do burial in this way, that as far as I know, that doesn't exist at all. There's no prohibition against being buried in this natural, non-toxified, sort of concrete-y, boxy way.
Okay, you ready for the next one?
Sure.
John had several, so I'll just go. His next question is about pacemakers and other implantable devices to be removed prior to green burial. Must that happen or not? And we had 2 or 3 other people ask a similar question.
Yeah. I don't think it's a problem. It's not really a problem for the site or for the environment. Again, trust soil. If you put a pacemaker in the soil, it isn't really going to do anything off-site or cause a toxicity problem. So no, I don't think those need to be removed. They could be removed if that's your desire, but I don't see a reason to do that. You know, it could be you'd establish a green cemetery and you want that. It's like, I don't, no jewelry, no pacemakers. Somebody might even say, take the fillings out of your teeth. I hope not, but basically, and I'll emphasize this again and again, soil is very good at purifying things. And, you know, if you have a septic field, that's why it works. Sometimes they fail if you overload them, but basically soil is extremely good at purifying most anything you throw at it. So if you take a column of soil and you put sewage on top, drinkable water comes out the bottom. And that's just a great thing about soils. And, you know, if you have a very sandy soil or a soil that's already toxified, you know, that's not what you would claim for that. But for most soils, so if you're careful at where you cite these things, reasonably careful, then you have all sorts of absorptive capacity to accommodate toxins, metals, you name it. It'll just stay there.
Okay, so his next one is, how long after green burial is anything substantive or of the descendant's body remains? This might argue against having a preserved land as a burial ground in perpetuity, thus opening the door to private green burial on one's home site without necessarily inhibiting the reuse of that land much later on.
Yeah, I mean, that's almost a philosophical question. You know, the bones would persist for some time, but they would also decompose, and certainly much, much faster than a conventional burial. But the question is, you know, even if there's not much left, is that still a burial site? Is that still a grave? And would you want to reuse that for something else? Or is it sort of sanctified and should it just be there in perpetuity? And that's my take, is it should be there in perpetuity. So you dedicate the land to this. Now, one thing to note is that all states in the USA, except 3, allow home burial. You'll be buried in your backyard. So California, Indiana, and Washington do not allow it. And the District of Columbia does not allow it. But there are questions that need to be faced when you do that. And one of them is the encumbrance of that land and what happens when you sell that place. And are you okay with somebody digging up grandma? Or are you going to put an easement on that says you can't ever dig up grandma and thereby potentially reduce the value of your property? Home burial sounds nice, but I would advocate for places that have the best legal guarantee that we can muster of perpetuity. They're always going to be there. So I don't know if that answers the question very well, but yeah.
Okay. His last question for John Goodman was, please compare and contrast your green burial with aquamation or other alternative ecological sensitive burial practices?
Yeah, there's lots of ideas and some new technologies for, you know, dealing with the body. And you can dissolve a body in a strong base, you know, basically dissolve the body in high temperature with a bunch of lye, and it essentially turns into liquid you dissolve. And that's doable, and I think it's legal. What I understand typically happens is that then you just pour you down the drain. So the question becomes, what do you do with the dissolved liquid that contains the remains of that person? And I think, again, green burial cemeteries, it might be a great place to put it. You neutralize that material and find a place to put it that memorializes that person. And there's another technology, anyway, where
alkaline hydrolysis is legal in California, Holly Blue Hawkins says.
Okay, alkaline hydrolysis is basically dissolving you in lye. The other thing that is, the name is, it'll come to me right after the Zoom is over. It was developed in Sweden. I don't know if it's legal here, and that's where they freeze dry you and vibrate you, and you turn into sort of just a pile of freeze-dried relics. It's different than, it's like cremation, but it's not, there's no burning. It's more of a freeze dry and vibrate you into dust.
Holly also says promission.
Promission, that's it. Yeah.
Jean's shaking her head. Yes.
Yes.
Thank
promission.
you, Jean.
It's kind of a neat idea, but then what do you do with that stuff? So again, a place to put that where you have some sense of perpetuity or some guarantee of perpetuity. Or you can dump it in the ocean, or you can people have many, many creative things that they do with ashes. It's one of the cool things about cremation is that you can do a lot of really interesting things, and people do with ashes. And you could do the same with the alkaline hydrolysis or the promission, is that you have a material that is not regulated, is not considered dangerous in any way, and you do whatever you want with it.
All right, the next question is by Peter Arnson. I'm sorry if I butcher your guys' names. He says, I expect soil composition and moisture creates complex variables, but what's the approximate timing for decomposition of the shroud or container and a buried human body?
Yeah, it's basically maybe a few months. Most of the soft tissues, if you do a real natural burial with a shroud, for example, the soft tissue will be gone in maybe even in weeks. And there are a lot of variables of moisture and soil biota and the texture of the soil and whatnot. So it's not really that answerable a question, but it's fast. It's really fast. Yeah, and a lot faster than the conventional burial. As I mentioned, when you're embalmed and put in a tight box, you eventually liquefy and seep out the bottom. And so the idea that you're not mummified when you get embalmed, it doesn't work that way. And so that doesn't preserve your body to where you could open it up and there's still like a person in there. So.
What was that?
Okay, the next question is, how are green burial sites marked so you know who is where? Are there options for a headstone or other marker so family members can find grave sites, even if trees have grown beyond recognition or died?
Yes, so we have this amazing technology called GPS now, and you get the GPS coordinates and you can easily find that into the future. But there's also, monuments that can be placed, and people like monuments. They, make it look more like a cemetery than if you don't have them at all. But if you have, very tasteful, natural monuments that are kind of flush with the ground, many conventional cemeteries do this now, then, those should be there. And even if they get buried, you could find them later on. But the real key is GPS.
Okay.
Yeah, and if you have a tree that's been planted, that tree could actually be tagged with a passive transmitter, so you could identify it with a little device, and it doesn't need a battery. It's passive, so you can find that tree into the future. And if you plant the right kind of tree, it should be there for hundreds of years, if not thousands.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, the next question is, perhaps you've already answered this question, but some time ago, when I called the folks at the cemetery in Blue Lake, I was told I couldn't reserve a green burial space until I had a terminal diagnosis, I think 6 months before my estimated time of departure. Is this a common requirement?
I don't think it's a common requirement. I think it's unfortunate. And I think if you set up a green cemetery, you really want what do they call it, pre-need purchases. You want to sell those plots in advance. There's been lots of scams for this, so that the state regulation is quite focused on trying to prevent the cemetery scams that have happened all around. But I think it's a real drawback for the Blue Lake Cemetery. You can't go and get a place and then have that taken care of. And you can't buy a set of places for your family. And often people want to be buried together. And many cemeteries do allow this and encourage it, actually. And you may even get a cold call from somebody that wants to sell you some cemetery plots, and be careful about that. But yeah, people like the idea of the whole family being kind of buried together over time. And you'll see this in cemeteries frequently, but you can't do that at Blue Lake. So.
Okay, the next question is, I'm hoping for a green burial as a means for expanding protections of wildlife habitat in perpetuity. Are you aware of possibilities for creating conservation easements for green burials, for legalizing home burial, or for wonders of wildlands?
Yes, for the wildlands for sure. And I hope that people will establish these kinds of cemeteries that have ecological land preservation, wildlife preservation and enhancement as part of them. As far as home burials, that's a different issue, and I know there are people working on trying to make that legal in California. But if you want to preserve wildlife, you need bigger areas in your backyard. You need landscapes. So.
Okay, excellent. The next one is, what are the next steps for creating a natural burial option in Humboldt County? Specifically, how can I help this vision become a real option for myself and my peer group?
If you have 20 acres, that would really help. And I think just talk it up. Let people know that you want that. And when fundraising comes around, I don't see it yet for any of these sites, but we'll be doing some soon. And make your contributions. I think there'll be some GoFundMe's out there for getting these things going. It depends. There's philanthropists, and then there's the rest of us who might donate $100 or something like that to getting these things to happen. So stay tuned. There's a lot of interest in this. The baby boomers want it. It will happen. It's slow, and there's a lag between what we want now and what's available. But I do believe that will be.
Okay, the next question is, I'm often asked, can I have a green burial on my own property in Humboldt County? I thought I heard you say that in California that's not allowed?
It is not allowed. If you have a pioneer cemetery on your property and it has I forget what the number is, I think it might be 8, something like that. If you have existing historical graves on your property, then it is grandfathered as a cemetery, and you can do it. But otherwise, it's not legal in California. You could.
Oh, interesting, because I thought I had heard my in-laws tell me at one point that they could on their property. They own property in Arcata or in Bayside, but that there was permits and things you have to apply for and go through all these hoops and things you have to do it. But
as far as I know, it's not permitted.
Okay. And the next question is the practice of embalming decreasing? Is the next question.
Yes, I believe it is. And embalming is not required anywhere. And
your phone has no signal, so I can't help you with that at the moment.
Embalming came about as a result of the Civil War, when bodies of soldiers needed to be transported to whole other states, and it took a long time. And so there needed to be a preservation system for that, and that's where embalming came from. They also wanted to take Abraham Lincoln's body all around the Union and on a train, and so that Abe got embalmed, and that's how that came about. And also, if people want to have viewings in the funeral home where the person can be seen, embalming can be helpful for that. It isn't necessary, actually. You can. I've been told you can have viewings without embalming, but it's a little more problematic. You just need a lot of dry ice, I think. But this funeral practice is not something that you want to ask me about. I'm focused on burial, and there's a whole lot that goes on between when you know you're going to die, was actually all of us actually, and when you're ready to be put in the ground. And the put in the ground part I know about. The rest of it, there's a lot of other people that know about, and I think that the mission of the Funeral Consumers Alliance is the whole package. And you have other experts that can talk to those issues about funerals and how you do that at home and what your rights are and all the rest of it.
Okay.
It's a very important area.
Next question is, how much time should pass from one burial to another in the same location?
I'm
assuming they mean referring to green burial, but.
Yeah, really good question, and I don't know the answer to that. You know, if there's like a solid casket, then, you know, sometimes they put another one right on top. And actually, I believe in California, you can go 8 inches deep if there's a second burial.
I think they're probably referring to green burial, though. Like in green burial, would you have some sort of amount of time pass between that?
Yes, and I don't know what that is. It's a really good question, and we're going to have to answer that. So,
okay, you'll look it up and get back to us.
That would only apply if you want the next grave to be right on top of the other grave, though. Otherwise, just put it next door.
Okay. Does assumption of perpetuity have to remain as an obstacle? Nothing really is forever.
Well, that's right, and our legal constraints are not actually guaranteed forever and ever. You know, the society and our legal frameworks could come apart. We hope they don't, but you know that has happened in history. So nothing is really forever. The sun will burn out in a few billion years. So perpetuity, as best we can manage it, and an intention of perpetuity and a statement of perpetuity, I think, is very important for burial areas, and just should be the norm. It should be a requirement, in my view.
All right. The next question is, what is your take on better place forests? Their price ranges from $2,900 to $16,000.
Holy crap! What a ripoff!
Sorry, that was my husband's comment.
Sorry.
He can't hear you because I have headphones in, but he heard me read it. So
yes, well, I know those folks. They're lovely Canadians. They don't allow burial, and their reason they give for that is because it's too damaging to the forest. That is not true, and we have a set of best practices that show how you can do burial in an existing forest that is not really significantly deleterious to the forest. I think they just don't want to deal with the complexity of burial, so they only allow spreading of ashes. Their prices are really high for what they're allowing. But you know, that's that. They're venture funded. I think there's an intention. Somebody in the company wants to make a killing on this. They're very good at advertising. The last I checked, their contracts weren't at all satisfactory to me about perpetuity, but they may have fixed that by now. But I do salute the idea of spreading ashes under trees. The trees will take up the calcium and the phosphorus and the potassium and that, and so it's a good idea in that regard. But it is expensive. It's not burial. It's only ashes, and you know, that's an option though, and it's out there. So
okay. The next question is, why is human composting a wonderful innovation if soil will do the same thing but take a little longer, which might be a good thing?
Very good point. And, you know, I guess I would say human composting is lovely. If you wanted, you know, grandpa to be part of your garden, you can't do that in California. So turning grandpa into compost and then bringing him to your garden is doable. So that's kind of why I see it as a really valuable thing. But yes, trust soil. Soil can compost a person really, really well, and better than the sort of industrial setup that is necessary for the human composting that they've worked out in Washington. So it's another option. I think it's a lovely option, and it allows you to, you know, you've got a cubic yard of compost to figure out cool things to do with, and you know, put it in a garden or put it under a tree, or use it to enhance a soil.
Okay. The next one is why do you say low density is a good way to go? Are there environmental concerns for greater density?
No, just preserving the naturalness of the place, and preserving the feeling that the place is the place, and it just happens to be a cemetery, rather than a high density cemetery is, there's bodies everywhere. So that's just a personal preference of mine, actually. But if, say, I were to go to the state or the county and say, you should allow cemeteries in this zone if they're low density cemeteries, that might be a little more convincing than if we're going to put in 1,000 bodies to the acre. And you might get a waiver from that, or you might be able to change the law based on that low density specification.
Excellent. Okay. We only have a few more because some of them are repeats, so I've just skipped over those if you've already answered it. Question about the perpetuity requirement. Have you projected when we run out of land for burial?
In the city cemeteries, it's already happening. There is many cemeteries could easily be turned into parks. They're often really not used that way now. There's that huge cemetery in the middle of Eureka off of Myrtle. And that could be a beautiful park, but right now it's just a mess and nobody goes there. And there's a big fence around it, and there's two sad little trees. And I've gone off the topic. If we're willing to go out into the wildlands and make wilderness burial areas, we're not going to run out. We'll never run out.
I think I have to tend to agree. Yeah.
There's a lot of land out there, folks.
Yeah, exactly. Do you foresee the Blue Lake green burial is quite expensive? Do you foresee this option being more affordable when we have another local option?
I would like it to be super affordable. And a wise friend of mine said, can you make it cheaper than cremation? And it's like, yes, I think you actually could. And especially if you could find a philanthropist that's willing to kind of bankroll this kind of distributed philanthropy of, cremation is $1,000. Well, what if we can sell you a green burial for, 800 or something like that? So yes, I think you want to keep the price as low as possible. It's a people's cemetery and not a fancy place to be buried.
This next question probably isn't one for you. It says, if you want to be interred at a distant cemetery, how is your body transferred there?
That's not one for me, but there are certainly people that are in the business of
to answer that. Okay.
Or that have the vehicles to do that, and if you need them, they will show up.
Okay. Someone says they were a witness to green burial in Trinidad Cemetery this last year, smaller than Blue Lake, but it was a Jewish ceremony, so maybe it's not a public cemetery? ?
Trinidad is a public cemetery as far as I know. And I would like to see that allow green burials. Maybe it does if you can convince them that your religion requires that, which, by the way, all three Abrahamic religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, all require burial, not cremation. They prohibit cremation. Lots of non-observant people that do cremation anyway, but you're not supposed to. But anyway, I don't know with Trinidad. I think it's a conventional cemetery, and I don't know what they may allow. But there is an aspiration to establish a green burial cemetery right next to that. And so I hope that can happen.
Okay. Have you ever heard of natural passages?
Yes, but I can't remember what exactly it is.
And then they say Juan Martinez and Jane Hillhouse are involved in promoting a conservation green burial opening very soon. And then they give a phone number for you to contact for more info. So I'll pass that along to you.
Yeah,
the last
nice
one
to know where that is. Where is that? Yeah.
The last one I got was someone just asked how they can support you and your goals. So I figured that was a good question to end on. I did post your website in there in the chat for them. But if you want to comment on that, how can people help you and support you in your goals in this mission?
Well, if you have one of those skills that I mentioned in the call to action, please send me an email or contact me somehow. We do need that kind of expertise. And then at some point, we'll probably have a GoFundMe to raise money. And so stay tuned for that. And the other way to support me is listen to me blabbing on Zoom, which you've done. So thank you so much.
Can they contact you through your website since I've shared that with them?
No, but my email is just mjfurniss@gmail.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Excellent. And I will put that on the website, on our website, FCA website, for people to use to contact you, and any that I get, I will send it along. Somebody's asking if you can reiterate the skills that you need to help.
Yeah, we need a volunteer coordinator, an attorney, landscape architect, environmental civil engineer, for trail design. We need fundraisers. And then I would like to empower all of you that have listened to this and like it to be culture changers. And choose green burial for yourself and talk it up with folks and let people know it's doable. It's not illegal. It's a nice way to go. And, trust soil.
All right. Thank you so much, Michael. Yeah. If you have any questions and you didn't get his email, just let me know and I'll do my best to get it to you. Thanks so much, Michael. I appreciate it. It was very informative. I learned a lot.
Thank you, everybody.